Hello, hello. So here we are on Sunday, the 2nd of March, and the year has begun with a bang. So we're into the MGR, and it's going to be over before we before we know it. Sounds funny to talk about that, but I've just been doing some stuff with the Golden Globe race, and it's now 500 and something days away from the start of the Golden Globe in September 2026. And I thought, cheap, it's going to be here before we know it. And as soon as I was saying that to a few people, I thought, cheapest, that means the MGR is going to be over before we know it, and it's already started. So it's all looking very exciting. We're going to go through some fun stuff, and I'm going to, you, the loyal followers who are here, you don't know this yet because some of the people come in later on, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek at something, a project that we were working on many years ago. It's hard to believe it was so long ago, and we still haven't put anything out there in the public. So I'm just going to start sowing a seed here and explain the whole history of that as we go forward. Anyway, and release some amazing pictures or gossip stuff. So stand by for that lot. It's Sunday, so we're not in a rush. And I was thinking, oh, I should change my clothes and get organised and stuff like that. And because I've got the Saab Delone on, nothing 580. And then I thought, well, the Saab Delone, they've been a great partner for a long time. And there is even a connection there, which I'll bring up at the end of this, which will be a bit of fun for the MGR boats and the Globe 580 class in September of 26. So a few things to talk about. And the other fun news, of course, is there's a new record for the 580s. So it's as if I should start this upside down when everyone's here. But I can see the numbers slowly building. Maybe everyone's had a great Sunday. It's been an amazing day in La Sable d'Olonne. Not a cloud in the sky. It's still cool, but it was a beautiful day. And of course, I was stuck inside most of the day. We went down and got some local food for a change, but that was about it. We've been inside catching up on stuff. So that's our lot. But yeah, great day here. So I think I'll get straight into the tracker, and I feel sorry for those who are going to miss the start, but they can watch the replay because there is a few fun things happening there. And it's all got to do with this situation right here. Oh, sorry, wrong one. I'm on the wrong track a bit. There I am there. I'll just push this up so you can see more of the actual currents and so on. I haven't wanted to talk about it before because I know for a fact that some people, after seeing this, get messages off to their skippers with nothing wrong with that. But an interesting thing happened on the way to the office being the end of the marina at the National Sailing Academy in Antigua. I was wandering down the dock early on, and I'd been looking at the track and realizing we were going to be late, and then I just late to Panama. This was probably 10 days before the start. And I was looking at the currents and thinking, oh, jeepers, they're going to hook into the currents and that's going to make them even quicker and blah, blah, blah. So currents were on my mind. And as I went down the dock, I saw Adam and we were just chatting. He was just finishing his repairs and everything to his dagger boards. And in the conversation, I said, hey, look, make sure you hook into the currents, or at least know where the rivers are, plot them, and then you'll know where to go when it's happening. I mentioned it to another, maybe one or two others, but Adam's been the only one that's actually hooked in there. And it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because now I'll give you the full brief. There are two parts to the situation with currents. The first one is making sure that you don't. In fact, I should leave. I think I'll pick this conversation up when I've finished the positions, because then there'll be more people that are logged in. But I'll tell you the whole story about how the currents work here, and it looks like Adam's the only one that's picking up and taking a chance with this, and it's probably going to pay dividends. So before we get there, we'll start at the back of the fleet and look at. I'll get off the currents now. I'll come back to this. This will be the last thing we talk about before we go into Q&A at the end. So we're now back onto the wind. You'll see Gary still sitting there. He hasn't left. We haven't heard, but he's going to give us 24 hours notice of what goes on. Trekker's position is a little bit old. If you're watching that was from yesterday at 1400. We're not getting a signal there. He's now got both units running and a few other bits and pieces. So there's something going wrong with his tracker. We're not concerned. He's got various forms of communication. It's just sad that we can't see where he is in relation to the other fleet. But as a guide, you would expect to see him somewhere between Peter Punk and number 2. So he's going to be in there somewhere, just in that group, tail enders. So for now, we'll forget about Trekker, but accept the fact he's having a good time. The situation, I'm going to walk through the fleet, and then we'll talk about the weather and the currents. So Skookum doing okay, 5.2 knots, still making good time, 115-mile day. So that's going to push him up above the average. Popeye, 4.3 knots and 106-mile day. He sent me a message. I'm going to read a couple of the messages that I've got, just explaining, they're telling me what's going on there, and they're all having fun, but each of them have got their own little challenges and contrasts. Peter Punk still sailing well, 5.6 knots, 108-mile day, but she's still going to be sitting a long way further back than we would have thought. Sun Bear pushing along okay, certainly picked up the speed a little bit, 5.3, 117-mile day. Not quite, he's back on the run line, but he's steering a funny course. He's staying out of the light winds in the lead, beside the land there where it heats up. Jacob on Bibby, 4.8 knots and 110-mile day. Pretty good, no complaints. Delja 100, John, 5.9 knots and doing, where do we go here? 128-mile day. So they're all getting really good daily runs, way above what we call the normal passage planning average of 100. Argo's got a good story. I'm going to read you all that in a minute. Manager sent me a long copy of Kristen's experiences. He's getting hammered because of the currents, wind against tide, completely, I won't say out of control. He's not out of control, but he's really struggling with what's going on, and explains it pretty well in a message I will read. So 5.2 knots, 120-mile day. Some of these even mild current difference is doing okay. So, adding to the total. John, we went through 128-mile day. So then we come across to Little B. Little B, 4.8 knots and 125-mile day. Then right on top of Immortal Gain, 5.8 knots and 130-mile day. Then we've got Captain Coconut doing okay. We don't get his daily average, but he's right there. He's got 2 people, 2580s bearing down on him. Origami, 4.5 knots, 119-mile day. Now, that's a bit slower than one would expect, and let's have a look at what might be causing that. It might be currents again, instead of just lack of wind vane, but that wouldn't be helping at all. Renaud, 5.8 knots, 134-mile day, so that's not too bad. Now, let's look at Little Wren, showing 148 nautical mile day, but he's actually pushed that out substantially. He's got a confirmed 160 point something mile day there, which is a new record. It's confirmed by the GPS, and it's being assisted greatly by the currents. So we'll get into that when we get through this particular story. And in fact, I didn't get his picture of his chart plot. I just shared a post about this, and you'll see it there. But anyway, let's have a look. There's Panama there. You've got Panama just in the picture. I'm going to push the weather forward so you can just confirm that there's only going to be mild changes. You can see here we go through to the second day, or the next day rather, and you can see up front there's quite a softening of the breeze for the third. Still a bit softer than what they've got now. Then it comes back a bit for the fourth, but by the time they get to the fourth, they're all going to be sailing out of this wind band here, and the greeny color, light green, and starting to move into the light blue. Now the light blue is only 5 knots, 5 to 10 if you're lucky. So it's absolutely slowing down. It's going to be a slow slog there coming through. And as you'll see in a minute, they've got to push through head currents. They're all heading straight for the head currents, and it'll be interesting to see, even after I say this, what happens with the fleet direction. Some of them may start to move out. I'm not sure, but they're in line for a collision with the head currents as you approach Panama. They're all talking about how the current is dictating what's happening to the sea, and when it's not both heading in the same direction, it gets very uncontrollable, and I can verify that, having experienced that quite often myself. And I won't say it's a well-known fact going into Panama, but people do talk about it. All cruising boats talk about how it can really cut up quite nasty in here. So if we won't worry about the leaderboard, we know roughly when they're going to come. So I'll now push over to the currents and try and explain what little b is actually doing here. So this is the rivers of currents as they flow. Now, the first thing that you'll notice is that that's the currents for now, okay? And there's only slight movement in the next few days. If we push this through, you'll see there is movement, but not much at all. It's pretty much holding. There goes to the third, there goes to the fourth, and particularly look at this area here where they're going to come along and they want to try and get to Panama. Anytime coming through here, they're going to really start to buck the weather. So it's probably nice that the wind is dropping off, because if you get 20 knots of wind coming from the northeast here, like a trade wind coming down, and you meet up with this current, which is running between half a knot and 1.5 knots, maybe even more in this blue, it can get very ugly, especially for a little boat. But so it's pretty much holding. So it's a counterclockwise rotation around this pivot point there. And here there's a hole, so there's nothing happening. But eventually, very soon, like Renaud's going to start to run in this head current. Now, how fast is the yellow? If we look at come down to the gauge here, you can see here's a yellow here. So it's somewhere just below a knot. So let's just assume it's 0.8 of a knot. If you're in that so every hour you're losing 0.8 of a mile. So in 10 hours, it's costing you 8 miles. Okay, and if you're doing 4 knots, that's 2 hours. Does that make sense? Hope it does. So the distance then in these current areas, if I pull this up, so the yellow. Oh, we didn't show you the steeper currents. If we come back down here again, you'll see a good color purple is about 1.5 knots, and if you go into the blues, some of these blues up here are 2 knots. So if you sit in that for 10 hours, it's 20 miles. If you're sailing in that blue for 10 hours, it's 20 miles. So that's enough of the gradient there. Let's just talk about the distances now. So if I slide that up there and push that down here, you can see now, I'll put that back to today's weather. I put my measuring tool on here, and let's say, looking at Renaud, if he was to beeline, let's say where he is now, I probably shouldn't be going through this, but let's just say he carried on his course now. He's going to start to connect to the current about there somewhere. Let's say here. So the next 40 miles, in the next 8 hours, he's going to start to come into the current. Okay, and then he'll be in that current if he wanted to go straight line for 150 miles, right? So and the wind's going to die out, so average speed could be down as low as 3 knots. So that's 50 hours that's going to take if this average speed goes down to about the 3 knots. For 50 hours, if you said the average current here is, even if it was half a knot, that's 25 miles, right? So half a knot every hour over 50 hours is 25 miles, and 25 miles, if you're only doing 3 knots, is like about another 8 hours or so added onto your course. And that can be substantial. 8 hours at your normal sailing speed of 5 knots is 40 miles. So this is now where you can see the game plan of little b, because if we come back to our distance measuring now and say, okay, so where he is now, he'll be making a beeline pretty much to, in fact, I don't think he will. I think what he'll probably do, he'll beeline something like this to make the most of the current, and we'll just see what the total distance difference is. If he makes a course across this current here, and even if I'll squeak a bit to do the optimum that a routing program might do, there's total distance there is 197 miles. Okay, I'll just bring it back a bit. You could squeak it to there. Okay, 180 miles, near enough. Okay, so there's 180 miles, and then straight down to Panama, and even then you'd be better off to, well, it's not so bad. 180, so it's 280 miles if he does that course there, stays in the current there, follows it down here, and then cuts across there at pretty much 90 degrees. So a little bit head current, but that's what did I say? 180 plus. So that one's 106, and this one's 180. So 286, 290 miles. The direct line course from there to there is 267. So he's only adding 20 miles in actual distance by staying in the current and coming down there. You can actually work this out, the total benefit, but let's just say from there to there, 166. Okay, so if he was doing, I'm just using my mental capacity here just to show I don't have dementia yet, but anyway, 166, if he was doing 5 knots sailing in that time, it's going to take him 32 hours. So if he was in that current for 32 hours and he's getting, say, up to 1 knot, because some of this is over, that's 32 miles. So you've gained 32 miles there straight away. Then if you come down here and you say that's 85 miles at 5 knots, just to be, it's easy to calculate. So what did I say? He had, was that 32 miles in the beginning then? No, 20 miles. Shit, I'm losing it. I can't my brain capacity. So 180 miles at 5 knots, 10 to be 18, that's 8 to 16, 36 hours, right? So it's 36 hours in the current there. It's going to be less because you've got compounding of the current helping it, 32 hours, and then get to there, 5 knots, another 15, so 32, 42. Okay, I'll do another way. So 32 hours at, say, let's just say 1 knot. There's 32 miles. And then here, that'd be 15 hours at, say, we could call that 1 knot again. 32 and 15 is 32, 42, nearly 50 miles. So he could get a free ride for nearly 50 miles, which is 50 miles on 300, the total distance at 5 knots is 10 hours. So 300, he's going to pick up close to a day, right? I don't know whether any of this is making sense, but anyway, you can see the concept of sailing a little bit further, stay in the current longer, come right down, not only to get the miles, but the wind, which is going to be coming this way and hooking around, is going to keep the sea state even better. Now, the difference then is these guys here trying to plug along. If they're smart, they'll stay up high, right up high until they get here and then dip down. If they try and come down here and push through that current, they're going to be sailing at 3 knots, losing at least a knot all the way. And if they're only doing 3 knots, that really compounds itself. It could cost them another 10, 15 hours just in this little section down here that they're losing. So let's wait and see what happens. But that's absolutely what Adam is doing. And he picked up the 160-mile day because of it. And I told his manager, Kerry, I said, hey, that's cheating. He's got the current, but what the heck? That's the way sailing works. So he's now holding the new record for a 580. That's a bit of a complication, but that's where you're at. Now, I think we've finished on the tracker, so I'll come back and I'll read you some of the messages I got here. Okay, so we're on. So I'll read you a couple of the messages. This one's a bit of a long one. I was going to make it into a post, but I haven't had time. So, okay, this is from Argo. This is from Christian. Okay, a slow night, but this is from last night. Slow light, but at least I only lost course for a short time. That was what he was talking about. I mentioned it, that he lost the balance. Only a jib and a small piece of the mainsail, and the boat still lost direction several times an hour. So he's got only the jib and a small piece of the mainsail. Okay, so that sounds reasonable. I'm going to pass comment on the sailing because you've got the jib. It's a fixed size. You can't. He's got hanks on, so you can't alter that. But he's got the whole jib and a little bit of main. That's all you can do. Most of the time, however, it got back on course by itself. So the wind vane, he's sailing with a wind pilot, pulled it back on course. That's a servo pendulum system. Only a few times was the wind steering system adjusted. That's the wind pilot adjusted. Although the screw that is supposed to prevent this is extremely tightened. So it must be hard for him to undo that screw. The waves here with wind against the current were crazy. And you get a feeling why the headland is called Little Cape Horn. And I don't want to know what it's like here in a storm. Okay. The boat moved so extremely in the waves that within 1 second, water was scooped into the cockpit, first on one side and then on the other side. It's so easy to get your legs caught in the cockpit, and holding on becomes a challenge. Now, Holiday Dan, also reported that he was staying up last night because the sea was a bit crazy, and they can absolutely detect the impact of this current, an adverse current, and the wind coming in from behind them. So back to Argo, as it was no longer safe outside, I spent the night below deck, where anything that isn't secured just flies around. So it sounds pretty uncomfortable. I hit pretty much everything you can last night. You can only really hold on and support yourself with your legs when you're awake. When you're asleep, the grip or tension on your legs loosen and the boat moves without warning. It's a boat. Boom, from away from one side. The weight distribution in the boat is so important, and I had to change position several times because otherwise the boat wouldn't get back on course on its own. I can remember something similar on Tracker, where in certain conditions you feel the boat's losing it. The servo pendulum's right across, and it's trying to alter the tiller's hard across. It's not quite enough, and I'd make a dive to the other side of the boat to help it stand up more. And when it stands up more, the rudder comes into effect, and the pendulum's a bit better, and it'll slowly come back on course without having to go on deck. I hope I didn't stay in that parking position for too long. The alarm was usually set for 20 minutes, so he's only sleeping for 20 minutes at a time. So that was pretty interesting. I had another one here. Yeah, from Adam, just talking about the new record for the boat, 160.3 nautical miles, and that was from noon to noon. The average speeds that are worked out on the tracker are actually set up to go from whatever the speed was for 24 hours from the time of the position report back to the next 24 hours. So it keeps progressively walking forward. But Adam's gone the traditional route using his chart plotter, and he's picking noon to noon. So noon to noon, he got 160.3 nautical miles, which is not too bad, even though he's cheating because of the current. But that's the way sailing works, so it's added in, and that's fine. so that's pretty cool. I had one here from Popeye, which is also very interesting, and I don't think we put this up as a post, but it's pretty cool because it's come back. This is direct from him to me. Just talking about the YB. Just a brief update on progress. Had a bad start, wasn't prepared for the sail changes on the way down, went close to the island. This is at the start, just outside the shadow of the wind, and had calm waters that brought me back up into the middle of the fleet. I was exhausted first couple of nights and trimmed down to jib only, which brought me to the back of the fleet. Been having good days since, but last night I got caught out with the A5 when the wind picked up in the early hours and shifted a bit. Today, back on track with the jib poled out, A7 running and a little bit of main up. I set up the mount for the jet boil outside in Antigua because he had a jet boil inside the boat and his barbie on the outside, but the barbie's not so good for boiling water. So he put the jet boil mount outside in Antigua and had my first hot cup of tea yesterday, and today some hot 3-minute noodles. Sounds like a good food routine on board. Tomorrow we'll experiment more. Looks like I get in on the 5th or the 6th. Having fun now, trying to catch up with Jasmine and Jacob. All good, no issues. See you guys soon. Safe travels. The other interesting thing that Popeye alluded to in Antigua was that he actually lost a lot of weight coming across the Atlantic. He lost like 10 kilos or something. He's not a big guy anyway, and you could just about blow him off the marina with a big puff, but he's focused a bit more on food this trip. He doesn't talk a lot about using the stove. It doesn't matter. I only lit my stove 3 times across the Atlantic, so you can live without that stuff, and all is good. So generally, current is becoming a bit of a thing right now. So just to set the conversation, I'm going to show you a very tricky few pictures of something that's very interesting. Okay, and let's just see where it goes. So first of all, I'm going to put this into the screen, and I'll pop this. Oh, not that one. Oh, jeepers, get rid of that. That was me at a wine thing. Look at that. Wonder what that might be. This will get things happening. This, a long time ago, would have been the beginning of 2021. Everything was going off with the 580, and I had my own ambition on what I wanted to do. I'm going to scroll these through without saying too much, because those that are interested will probably start playing it back. But I decided I wanted to do another solo non-stop around the world, and started to sketch up some bits and pieces. Okay, and this is what was happening. Oh, it's Tantrum Drop Street Globe 980. Oh, I fancy having a Globe 980. Wouldn't that be interesting? So this is the beginning of 20. no, late 2020, beginning of 21, early 21. And this was the idea of that we had. Whilst I was building Trekker and all that sort of stuff, I'm thinking, oh, this could be a boat. This looks like a bit of a dog. The idea was also to make it in a 40-foot container, but use a high 40-foot container and put the boat on its side so it slipped straight in, and then the mast would be as long as the 40-foot container. So one boat, one container, didn't have to have a sleeve, and it was on a special cradle that slid in and out, and then you removed it from the cradle, and that was it. So there you go. You've had the first sneak peek of the concept drawings of the 980, and that went right to conclusion. And later on, I might actually show you what evolved over a period of about a year working with Giannis, and we came up with a brilliant boat, absolutely brilliant boat. And the plan was, after I finished my 980, after I finished my Transat, I would have started building the 980 straight away. In late 22, I would have started building this, and things would have got off to an interesting start, and so on. But for various reasons, one of which was the issue of how I felt having completed, and whilst I was in the middle of my hang on, Jane, can you just see if I'm still back on? I think you can hear me now. I pressed the wrong button then. If someone can hear me, you want to pass? Sorry? You see a drawing? Oh, shit. I pressed the wrong button. Hang on. Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay. All right, we're back. Sorry. So I'll get rid of this one. If I hit that again, I should go boom. Yeah, okay. So what happened to me while I'm in the middle of my Trekker experience, about halfway across, I'm starting to think that, I don't know whether I want to sit on a boat. I've told this story to some previously for another 7 months by myself, because I was enjoying people and enjoying events and all that sort of stuff. And I realized then for the first time in my life why I did all these other adventures, and it was to prove something to myself, and I didn't really need to prove anything to myself any longer. So why did I bring all this? And so I was happy to carry on, and I decided not to do that voyage, and we're sitting on the plans for this beautiful boat called the Globe 980. Similar construction and all the rest of it. Sail area displacement is very similar to the previous Figaro 3, so it's a real flyer, I got to tell you. And the reason I brought it up is because it just goes to show the impact that a voyage like this can have on any individual in the race. Now, some of them, in fact, all of the entrants going across in the Tasman would have been very focused on the MGR, except for Niels, because he was going home after. And so they had a focus and they had a direction, and they know exactly why they're there, and they know exactly what they want to do. Okay, now that got them into Antigua. The mind game now is such that from Antigua to Panama is a real short sprint, and a lot of them didn't think it, they're not thinking of it as a short sprint. They know it's a lot shorter than across the Atlantic, and the weather's pretty cool. And now they've enjoyed the first half of the voyage. Now they've got some challenges again with the currents and the wind and all this sort of stuff, and so it's making it more interesting for them. They're engaged and all the rest of it. When they're sailing across the Pacific from the next leg, I can guarantee you that some will start to not question what they're doing, but they'll start to analyze what's going on, because they're going to have a long time to think about life and the meaning of life and what they're doing sitting out the boat as they're heading off around the world. Because when you get to Fiji, it's like a turning point, right? Once you get to Fiji, everything's still going forwards, and to a degree from Fiji, you're coming home again, you're going all the way around. But for some, it's going to be a very interesting mind game, and that's a subject which will start to play out more and more when they get on the other side. At the moment, this is a short sprint. You could class it as that to Panama. Then you've got the excitement and the uncertainty of getting across the isthmus, and then the challenges of get the boat back together, find the marina, work out where we're going to go, and start again. And so it's still all new and fresh. But I've got to tell you, that next leg from Panama across the Pacific to French Polynesia, which could be very long and grinding and hot and a bit challenging, will be a whole new mindset in itself. So there's a whole series of things put together there. And it's funny how that evolved, because I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be a short tracker update. It's Sunday, we waffle on a bit on Sundays because we can. What am I going to talk about? And I thought, oh, I should start to explain how the mind game works and also bring into the picture of the 980. We did at one point think about creating a new class of boat. So there were two, the 580 and the Globe 980, and then integrating that into some of the things we do for those that want a bigger boat, okay, that consider the 580 to be a bit too specific for one particular role, and others might then want to have a slightly bigger boat that they can take their family on in between times and this, that, and the other. But decided it may confuse the issue, so we decided not to even do that. And if we had have done that, we would have launched the whole concept and broken the news about the 980 in Antigua at the start of the MGR. That was the other plan. So life goes around in circles, and everyone's happy with what's going on. Now it's all about currents and where to go and what to do and so on. So that's it for today. I'm going to go down here and say good day to everyone and see how things are going. G'day, John. Center the Journey of Shark. I have to look at that later and see what's going on. G'day, Roger. G'day, Adrian. Marek, any chance for Windy and a ruler on the tracker app? Oh, no, that's the whole subject in itself. In fact, it brings up, this is where you cop it on weekends. I'm already half an hour into it. But the app can never drive the same sort of things that we do on the PC version, on the wider, with the bigger tracker with YB. But there's a couple of things there. I'm not supposed to talk about it, I don't think. It's probably all right to talk about, but YB have used this map. We've been using the same map with the same bits on it since 2018, and it existed even before we got there. As I've mentioned many times, we're really happy with that map. Okay, it's very easy to understand. It's easy to use. It provides all the information we ever want to explain the story, especially in our other events when we're going through the Southern Ocean and everything. The weather changes are dramatic, and it's really interesting to talk that through. For the mini globe race, we're watching trade winds most of the time without a lot of changes. So anyway, but it's been there for a long time. And what's happening is right now, as we speak, YB are developing a much more interactive and inclusive tracker, a whole new concept. We haven't seen it yet. They've promised to give us the first go at it, just to have a look at it and play with it. Not in public here, but we certainly get to give some input. We actually, during the course of the GGR, it was the last GGR. Cheapers, I'm losing track of time here. Was it GGR or OGR? Jeepers. There was no, we played it around with the GGR, and then we used it in the OGR. I worked with Bayonet. Now, Bayonet were a very sophisticated, large company from the United Arab Emirates that are specialists in collecting data, all sorts of data from satellites and bits and pieces for industrial and corporate use and all sorts of things. And they worked with us, and we developed a very interactive concept for the tracker map of the OGR. And we were able to have on the tracker, you'd hit a button and there's the videos, and you hit another button, there's the phone calls, and you hit another button, there's the photographs, and they could even bring a satellite over and take a picture of the boat in the ocean and all this stuff. It was all on one what do we call it? Cheapers. One platform. One platform had everything, so you didn't have to go all over the internet and all over our website to bring everything in. It came off the one platform that you were using and looking at. Not dissimilar to what the Vendée Globe have just used. For any of them being through the Vendée Globe one, we were using that before they were, with Bayonet's help. So anyway, the new YB is going to be something similar and have all those useful features. Now with the app, we've mentioned a few times about some of the features of the app, and that wouldn't it be good to have this and that, but they weren't able to do it because the app was completely different than the program for the PC. So there is a new YB tracker for PCs in development right now. No idea when it's going to come up. Hopefully before the MGR is finished. And I'm not sure what's happening with the app, but the app is mainly focused about a basic position and a weather overlay, and that uses predict wind rather than the windy. And I much prefer windy for explaining it to the average person. predict wind, you've got to have a much better understanding. It's hard to pick the colours in your thing and so on. So the app is as good as it can get for the moment, but let's wait and see how far and what happens in the months ahead. Our money is on Adam to win the leg using the current. Well, you're probably biased, or you're probably a friend or family or whatever it is. But yes, I'm excited to see how it goes too. So we'll have to wait and see. But you can see it might only be a little bit of an advantage for Adam, but it's certainly not going to be a disadvantage. And where he picks up, so whatever advantage he picks up, it's a bit, even if it's only a little bit, it's double whammy, because the guys that are going the direct course are going to be in a negative position. They're going to be fighting a head current and also a sea state, which is completely different, which may also slow the boats down. So let's wait and see. But sometimes the long way around is the best way around. And the person who could explain that the easiest would be Eric. Those that watched Eric trying to tack up wind in the trade winds was just like a nightmare. He'll be dreaming about that for the rest of his life, thinking, how did I get myself down that end of the trade winds? Anyway, yep, all very interesting. Thanks, Peter. Hit the like button to show your appreciation. It's amazing coverage. Yeah, I agree, Jonathan. Way to go. Yes, please hit the like and subscribe and all that sort of stuff. If you're sick of watching Trump and the boys on the other side, then like us and forget about the rest of the world. Yeah, like and share and tell all your friends and all that sort of stuff. It'd be greatly appreciated. So we love the mini globe race. Jonathan asked, some of the sailors keeping their motors mounted underway to increase the weight aft while off the wind. Well, you know what? I'm still stunned. I don't know how many have left their motors on the back of the boat, but I saw Ayrton's there the other day thinking, oh, you got to be kidding me. That's the last thing I'd want to do, because it's not good for the motor, not good for the mount, all that sort of stuff. But anyway, everyone sails differently. I've got no answer on that. I don't think it's got to do with the weight aft. It is a problem. When you take it off, you've got to work out where to put it. I had my outboard off, I think, before the start even. Yeah, I did. We came out of when I did the Transat. We came out of Rubicon Marina, and when we're in the sailing zone, I actually took my outboard off. Then I got it off. I had the battery integral, so I took the battery off, put that in its padded bag. I got the outboard off, took that below, and put it in its bag and put that up forward. So it's completely other way. Too valuable and too not good for the elements to leave it there. But I think some are sailing with their outboard still sitting there. So that's all I can say. I think it might be just sometimes you get a bit lazy on your boat and you only want to do things you have to do and so on. I'm amazed, even in the Golden Globe race. I remember Susie Goodall. She's in the middle of the Indian Southern Ocean, and she's still got all her cockpit safety gear out. Life buoys and lights and all that sort of stuff. And you just don't need it. I think that was there, or maybe it was after. Maybe it was in the Pacific Southern Ocean after the stopover. When you come into they do a film drop. You got to put all your cockpit gear up because you might interact with someone or whatever. But yeah, you just don't need it out there deteriorating when you're sailing by yourself. So aren't the wind effects the current on the surface? No. Aren't the winds affecting the currents on the surface? No, not at all. That's a short answer. Not quite right, but if you've got a wind source that's basically always running from one direction, that has an influence on the currents for sure. But the main driver of currents is water temperature, salt water density, all those sorts of things. The currents, believe it or not, go all the way around the world, and they move water all the way from around the Pacific, underneath Australia, all the way through the Southern Ocean, up in the Atlantic, right up into the North Atlantic, round the corner. It's like a circular movement that just goes everywhere, and it's the biggest driver of weather, and it's the scariest part about global warming, climate change, call it what you like. If that Gulf Stream ever shuts down, Europe is going to freeze. It's going to be disastrous, and there are strong indicators that some of these major current streams around the world are actually slowing down dramatically, and the ramifications of that could be sudden, shocking changes to the weather. So watch this space. But generally, the currents are driven through other factors rather than the wind on the surface. It's an interesting subject. If you Google it, you'll be surprised at some of the stuff that happens. Actually, that brings up another point. As you know, Adam, no, was it Adam? No, it wasn't Adam. Little B, little B. Dan, Canada Dan, hit what he thinks was a citation, like a whale or something. Is something that the hit. I did the same thing. I hit a whale with absolute certainty in the BOC challenge. It was really scary. And it's a serious issue. Ship strikes of whales is one of the serious threats to all whales. We've actually integrated quite a lot of stuff into the Golden Globe and the Ocean Globe about this whole subject. In fact, if you wanted to do our fully crewed race now in the notice of race, you have to have a citation observer on board. Someone's trained to observe all sorts of whales and dolphins and mammals and so on, and you have to log all those sightings in a special form all the way around the world. And it's something we're doing with all our events, and we've integrated it into the GGR as well, to the point that you've got to have a set manual, same in the OGR, a particular field guide to whales and all this sort of stuff. And I was going to do it for the MGR, but we're all a bit busy and didn't. Now all of a sudden, bingo, we've got our first strike. So today I've been trying to buy 15 copies of of the book that we're recommending for the OGR and the GGR, and God, the nightmare was unreal. I get onto Amazon in America trying to buy these books to send down to Panama, and you think I get on there? They sort of threatened to cancel this, and because I had a French phone number, they wouldn't let me do this, that, and the other. And in the end, I just gave up. So then I tried to find a bookstore here where I can buy them, but no one's got 15 copies and so on. So if anyone's in America going to Panama, let me know and I'll get you to buy the books and I'll pay you for them because I want to get them on board. And we will start the reporting system for whales, dolphins, mammals, and we'll take the details on the strike that Adam had, and it's all useful data to collect for various organisations. So that's something that's happening in the background. I want to try and get that on for Panama now, because sailing across the Pacific, of course, they're going to be sailing right through all the whale migration and calving zones, where all the whales come up from the Southern Ocean, having fed and fattened up. They'll come up to Tonga and other spots all through French Polynesia and have their calves and so on and go back down. So they're going to see plenty of whales for sure. Hopefully won't hit any. So we'll integrate that into the next sailing instructions of the MGR as well. Boy, I digress, but it's Sunday, so there you go. Morning from New Zealand. G'day, Tyson. Thanks for the awesome updates. Cool. Can't get enough. Okay. Don, do you know why Trekker is now using a hydrobane and not a South Atlantic? Yeah, I do, actually. And why is the hydrobane linked to the boat tiller? Yeah, I can answer that. Seen on recent video for Ayrton. Warren. Okay. Ayrton sailed across the Atlantic with the South Atlantic wind vane that I used for my transatlantic. It worked perfectly. Ayrton didn't have any problems with it coming across the Atlantic. He wasn't forced to steer any time, so it was working fine. Ayrton's been involved with two Golden Globe races, right? Also the Ostar and what turned into be the No Star. It was the Ostar they ran when COVID was on, and so it wasn't really on officially, but the entrance went anyway because it was cancelled. So he's had a lot of experience with hydrobane, and his opinion was, and this is justifiable, was that the engineering and the reliability of a hydrobane is second to none in terms of an around the world voyage. So, and it's a plug and play. And by that, I mean, it's like an outboard motor. You just stick it on the back of the boat and it works straight away. It's no lines to the tiller, all that sort of stuff. And so he decided that he's desperate to finish the mini globe race. And he's had a lot of experience with the hydrobane, all his previous voyages with the hydrobane. He just liked hydrobane. So, but he stated publicly a few times he had no problem with the South Atlantic. It's just that he's going to be out there for 26,000 miles. He doesn't want to know about it. He knows the hydrobane really well. And so that's where it started. So he was the first one to roll over to the hydrobane. And that started a bit of a conversation with various people. Oh, why are you doing that? Blah, blah, blah. And I think those issues started to give a sense of satisfaction to some skippers. It's obviously a huge budget issue. The cost difference is about over 4 times the price of the special deal that we get with the South Atlantic. So, there's various factors there. So that's why he changed to his hydrobane. Then there was an issue which created all sorts of other stuff. I know the hydrobane quite well as well. I've got one on my other boat. I've sailed with lots of different wind vanes, and with the South Atlantic. Um, and he mounted it on the transom, and I didn't like the mount on the transom. It's way too close to the main rudder. So if you've got the main rudder, normally you fix that for an auxiliary rudder system, and then the hydrovane or the auxiliary rudder system turns like this, right? And so you need a bit of separation. If this is the ship's rudder and you've locked it centrally, right, like this, you need some movement there, so you're not going to interfere with the water flow over the blade of the hydrovane. Now, say my head is the front of the boat, so you're on the other side. If that's the ship rudder fixed, and the hydrovane decides to close like that for a steering moment to turn the bow to port, the little gap there, see, it's really close together, and yet the water coming from my head into that gap is huge, and it will try to squeeze through that little gap, and it just won't work. It creates drag. It's like a drogue, right? It's like a sea anchor. It'll stop the boat. It'll stall out. If you're a pilot, and I've flown lots of different things, I've got qualifications in basic aeronautical knowledge, and air is the same as water. You know that you can't do that. The airflow just won't work. It'll stall out and create drag and all this sort of stuff. So I said, Ayrton, that's not going to work. Anyway, that started the conversation. It's part of the reason the central rudder on the 580 is allowed to be removed and put the hydrovane dead center, because the surface area of the hydrovane rudder is the same as the ship's rudder, the 580. So we allowed that, and that's a whole conversation in itself. Hydrovane, and also Jonas Mederski, the designer of the boat, didn't recommend that. He's recommended that keep the ship's rudder, lock it centrally, and fit the hydrovane on the transom, with a reasonable separation. Okay, and there's sound reasons for doing that as well. So there's an argument for both. And anyway, so if you do set it on the transom and you set it a reasonable distance apart, so if this is the ship's rudder, you can fix that, and you can still turn the hydrovane rudder, and there's no real interaction, and it'll steer the boat. So that works as well. Anyway, Renaud, who's a pretty cluey sailor, he races foilers and all sorts of things in Switzerland on the lake, so he's quite sophisticated, quite knowledgeable, quite a performance sailor. He fitted his separate from the rudder, so you could leave the ship's rudder locked in and then steer the boat with the hydrovane. And he was the first one to come up with the idea, so why not link the two? Okay. And so he put a joint across so that when the hydrovane's driving, it's not driving one rudder, it's actually driving both rudders. Okay. Now, under the rules of one design rules and racing and everything, that's fine. You can do that. It's fine. Go ahead. And maybe he stumbled across something which makes it track really well, better than even having the two dagger boards on the transom to balance the boat with one rudder. So if you've got a servo pendulum, you have the servo pendulum going to steer the boat using the power of the water on the servo rudder coming up and down to pull ropes to move the ship's rudder, and use your dagger boards to balance the boat for heel and heavy weather downwind and so on. So there's a whole area of variety there that could be used to come up with the best solution, right? And ironically, because the dagger boards aren't compulsory, you can sail without them. You don't have to build them if you don't want to, but most people build them and wonder what they're for and then work it out later. Some people like them, some people don't. So that's a long answer to the short question. And I'm not saying anything that's right or wrong. I stand by the decision we all came to say, I'm not saying it's the best thing to do, but I'm quite comfortable with anyone that wants to save weight and just put the hydrovane centrally as a way of steering the boat, and either manually or under the wind vane flip-flop at the top. And now it's opened a can of worms because Renaud is performing really well with the main rudder and the hydrovane rudder. It runs the risk of people thinking, oh, that's the way to go. I can be fast just by doing that. Believe me, listen to what I'm saying. There's more to it than just doing that to go fast, right? I've seen that assumption with the GGR, and it's not sound. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong. It could be quite a performance, but there's more to it than that. It doesn't mean that Renaud's up front just because he's got the hydrovane and the main rudder linked together and sailing really well. For Ayrton, I think the issue of joining the hydrovane to the ship's rudder was a case of necessity as well, because there's no way doesn't matter. In my opinion, there's no way that would work efficiently by locking the ship's rudder, trying to use the hydrovane when the trailing edge of the hydrovane is going to come within half an inch or so of the locked ship's rudder. It just would not work. But by joining the two together, you create a slot, and they work in unison, which is fine. So it solves the problem of having to move the hydrovane. One thing that you may have noticed, and I certainly have right at the very beginning, that whenever you see Ayrton using the hydrovane in some situations, you can only use one solar panel because it's the windward solar panel where it's not affected by the flip-flop vane. You always see him, he's got the other one, it's just straight up and down, creating drag, which is going to affect the airflow to the wind vane, the flip-flop part of the wind vane, because it's like stalling. They've got this big square solar panel, vertical like that. When the wind hits that, it's going to go around either side. It'll distort the breeze there, but on the flip-flop, but that'll have very little issues, not a big issue at all for the vane working. But he's got an interaction problem as well with the flip-flop against these solar panels. So that was a long one. I'm going to need a drink after this, not alcohol. Anyway, g'day, Merrick. Oh, thanks, I'm back on. Good. Peter, thanks, Pete. Rachel, I can still hear and see you. Thank you. I wonder why Eric decided to go so far south. I'm not sure. No idea. He's happy. Oops, he's happy. He's picking up speed, and he feels comfortable with the boat. So that's cool. He's going faster and faster, slowly but surely. Now I've lost my place here. The question's just. Here we go. Rachel. I wonder why Eric's down there. It will be interesting to see if he keeps on his new, more northerly track and hooks into the current. I think you talk about Eric. I think he's a long way down, but anyway, let's wait and see. Back on. Thanks, Eric. Isn't Pitor, Trekker, and Captain Builder planning to sail around the world with something like your? No, absolutely not. Pitor is entered in the Global Solo Challenge event. When you can go in any boat and just go. He's a great sailor. He's built a fantastic boat. But it's nothing like the 980, nothing at all. It's quite a solid boat, big volume boat, big beam, all the rest of it. The 980, you've got to think about this. It's a 9.8 meter long boat, and it's going to fit in a 40-foot container. So it's a long cigar shape. And I'm very much a fan of long, narrow beam boats, same as Jean-Luc Vandenheed. We had a lot of interaction in the good old days. So my 50-footer for the BOC was 50-foot long and less than 12-foot beam. And Jean-Luc's always had long, skinny boats, the Red Cigar and all the others. He's had long, skinny boats. They're easy to drive, and they have very easy to set them up with parallel waterlines, no matter what angle of heel. So when if you've got a long, skinny boat, when you heel over, you don't screw up to windward at all. You just heel over and just keep driving. There's a lot to be said for that. And so I was surprised at the actual design that Giannis was able to come up with, given those parameters. So it had to fit on it. We got it wider than 8 feet, like containers are quite narrow, but it's tall. It's a high container, high 40-foot container, and we were able to put it on its side, which it gave you an opportunity to extend the beam again, and then we had to work the cabin top and the cockpit arrangement and stuff. And it's a really cool boat. It's like a little rocket ship. Not unlike boats from my era back then. There was a guy called Peter Mounsey in Queensland, Australia. He when I was a young lad sailing in those things, he was there as a bit older guy, and he was come up with some really good boats like that and had a lot of success. He's still alive, is Pete. He must be about 97 now or something. I see him every now and then, but anyway. So an 980 is an amazing design. The map is fine, just the Gulf of America's on it. Jeepers. No, it hasn't got the Gulf of America. It would be Gulf of Mexico. Don't go there. Jeepers. I'm going to get... Is anyone planning on a build? We haven't released the design. I'm sitting on it. I'll keep this conversation going. We had everything set to go with B&B to do the tooling for it and turn it into a kit and all that sort of stuff. But part of the success of the 580 is the events that go around it and the effort that we put into making it work. And I hesitate releasing it as just a set of plans, because you got to have something to do with a boat like that. So anyway, it's a beautiful boat, and it's no one's planning to build it because we haven't released the plans. and let's just see what happens. So 25 seats deployed to build the 580. How many to build the 980? Good question. You guess. I know. But anyway, yeah, it's amazing how you go through it, isn't it? Anyway, Peter. Evening, Don. Seems that coverage, remaps, weather, etc., was more helpful watching Kirsten and crowd than this race. Not sure why. Just a personal opinion so far. Um, yeah, because well, there's a couple of things there. First of all, is trade winds, right? The GGR didn't do really any. The only time it was trade winds was when it was going up the North Atlantic and coming down the South Atlantic. And if you remember, that was when it got a little. I won't call it boring, but it's just more of the same, day after day after day. Going through the Southern Ocean is like, whoa, hold on to your hats. This is happening. That's coming. This is going there. Because you're going all the way along the bottom of the Southern Ocean. It was just what I was saying about how there's not much, you don't know the weather because just, you just know every day it's going to be trade winds every day. And all you want to know is how strong it's going to blow. Right? And so that's why it's a little bit more boring. And it's also why we've said we're not going to do a tracker update every day because there's just not a lot happening. And it's going to get worse. When I say worse, if you're going 40, 50, 60 days across the Pacific in trade winds, if you did a tracker every day, we have a favourite saying, if there's nothing to say nothing. We're not here to try and pad it out. I mean, I'm waffling on. I've been here for 56 minutes already, but I'm, having fun with other subjects, and it's up to you whether you want to listen. But I know exactly what you're saying, Warren, about the difference between, hang on, was it, who, jeepers, who was it that just said Kirsten? Peter. I know exactly what you're saying, Peter, and you're quite right. It is completely different when you trade wind sailing around the world. It's, it's the milk run. You get out there and have a go and try and hang on and put up with the squalls and the little bits and pieces. But when you're going tactically, trying to get around the South Atlantic high, it's an absolute nightmare. And you've got all the interaction of the lows down the bottom, and then you've got lots of stuff going on. So and it's in legs. Even though they don't stop, it's like down the Atlantic, they're moving pretty quick, and then they cross to Australia, and then the next one's to cross to Cape Horn and blah blah blah. So these guys are sailing in paradise. But we'll be up once we get in the swing of it every other day, and or something like that, and see how we go. So okay, Marek. What I mean with the current is that say 15 centimeters of water on the surface can slower than the current itself a bit deeper down. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not an expert in this field, but yes, you're right. It can, if you've got constant wind going, it picks up its own movement. But the big issue is the wind against tide. That's the only thing you don't want to look at, and that'll become very obvious with the Gullis current, in many months, in 6 months or so. Or perhaps we should change to skipper names on the tracker because the 580s are all the same boat, unlike GGR where different boats are sailing. Yeah, I use the boat names. Skipper names, same thing. We that's what we do now. Basically, it's the boat name. So it could be the boat name or skipper name. But anyway, let's wait and see. Okay, I think we're done. All right. So just get out of here before the hour's up. So thanks very much, everybody, for following. We leave. We've got 2 days left here, a lot going on. So I'm sure things will get interesting as we get closer. And I'll be back for a tracker, I reckon, tomorrow night as well, similar time. Okay, I'm out of here. Thanks a lot, and we'll. I've got some other things, but I'll keep that for tomorrow. Okay, if I hit this, we should be gone. See ya. Oh, wrong one. That's the start. We don't want to go through the start again. See ya.
Mini Globe Race 2025. Small boat, huge adventure.